In the today's world, growth is powered by data and accelerated through transformation. As CEO of Latin America Foods and Global Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer for PepsiCo, Dr. Athina Kanioura is driving growth across one of the company's most dynamic regions, turning scale, speed, and local consumer insights into a powerful growth engine. At the same time, she is shaping PepsiCo's global agenda to make sure the company is fit for the future, connecting strategy to execution, unlocking efficiency, and transforming how the company grows at scale in every part of the world. Before PepsiCo, Athina spent 15 years at Accenture, where she built and led global AI and analytics practices, helping companies reinvent their businesses through technology and data. A global leader in strategy, technology, and transformation, Athina is redefining how growth is built in Latin America and across PepsiCo. Please welcome Dr. Athina Kanioura.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Athina, thank you so much for being with us
Juan
today.
Fernando. Buenos días a todos. My Spanish is good, but not that good like our previous speaker. So
Buenos
I'll be
días.
fluent in the next one. Buenos
Great,
días.
great. Let's start with a very personal question. We heard a little bit about your bio. Your title is long and powerful.
Too long.
Too long.
Too long.
CEO Latin America and Global Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at PepsiCo. You've been a transformation officer, a CEO, for 5.5 years. And for the past 6 months, you've also been the CEO of Latin America. That's a lot of work. How do you manage both areas of your work, and how important is Latin America for PepsiCo to have someone like you in charge of the region?
Yeah. Firstly, an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. This is a great venue, and very excited to hear kind of all the speakers for the rest of the day and experience the great things that all the companies are doing in the region, in, of course, the consumer industry that we all love and represent here. Yeah, I mean, doing two jobs is not easy, especially because both of them are equally important for the stakeholders, our shareholders, our people, and of course, kind of our chairman and CEO. But they are also quite symbiotic, because if you were to think of the role of a global chief strategy and transformation officer, is one, besides obviously setting the strategy for the future and making sure that the big priorities of the company are well served, engaging with consumers, driving commercial excellence, rethinking supply chains, driving employee experience. Part of that intentionality is also understanding what are the big growth levers for a company like us, which many of you know PepsiCo, obviously. We have beverages and hydration, we have foods and nutrition, we have wellness. I mean, we have pretty much everything in the F&B portfolio we cover through our strategy. So the role that was given later to me by the board, Latin America, was very intentional. One is because we believe in the growth of Latin America. And therefore, how do you do that with a very strategic intent is super important, because as we heard from the previous speaker, Latin America is not US, it's not one country. It comprises of many different cultures, many different priorities, many different tension points. So you have to grow intentionally with also very different consumer occasions that you have to develop, mature, and premiumize, I would say. So the role of the strategy becomes very critical on how do you do a very purposeful strategy for the next 3 years, aligning with the growth ambition that we had, that Latin America will grow double the rate of the US and triple the rate of anyone else. Oh. And that's a public commitment that we have for Latin America. The second big area, which also was mentioned, under my strategy and transformation, I'm also responsible for all technology. The future that is currently being shaped by the immersion of AI and the next wave of automation with physical AI is creating a very different reality on how everyone and Latin America will have to operate in a future where, as we say, aging population, less workers, much more expensive workers, and therefore the need to invest in a technology landscape to drive a different growth agenda where your bottom line will not be pressured all the time is creating for us a curve, a P&L curve that relies heavily on technology. So as part of my transformation role, I want to make LATAM the lighthouse for PepsiCo, and also the lighthouse in the region, why obviously we are working now in things like autonomous factories as part of the LATAM strategy.
So let's dig deep into that, becoming, making LATAM the lighthouse of overall PepsiCo strategy. What would you say, or how do you view Latin America as that place where you can test, pilot some of those important strategies or important strategic initiatives of PepsiCo?
Yeah, so one, and we'll always like to start with the consumers and the consumer potential. If you were to think of any food and beverages company, including retailers, that they do direct to consumer, maybe we touch the lives of the consumer 4 or 5 times a day, best case scenario. But consumers engage with food, with experiences, at least 10. So number one is how do you build these demand occasions in a very deliberate way that consumers engage with you always and everywhere. So the number one priority is how do you leverage technology, how do you leverage partnerships to create omni-channel, real-time, personalized experiences. So that is, I would say, priority number one if you were to think of that ecosystem. Secondly, it's the infrastructure of Latin America is evolving very fast. I mean, there's the high level of urbanization. Then you have rural areas, which is very difficult to serve for various reasons. So how do you create an ecosystem of growth through partnerships? Some of the partnerships are obviously the evolution of digital commerce and how you do that in the next commerce wave, including eventually agentic commerce. But also some of the partnerships is leveraging now an extensive network of retail partners that can serve that demand everywhere in the vicinity of where consumers are operating. So I would say there has been a historical focus on the urbanization and the urban consumers. There are also the rural consumers that we feel is a massive priority for Latin America. Now, pivoting a bit to logistics and operations. Latin America has this unique opportunity to be critical for each of the market's infrastructure and how you deliver the growth through localization of supply chains. This is something we've done extensively in the past years, but also as an export power, especially for the US and within, right? So it was interesting. I was on Monday with the US-Brazil Industry Week. There was in New York, and a big item of the discussion is how US and Brazil, as part of the Section 301, which you know is the tariff section that is currently being negotiated between Lula and the Trump administration, how do you ensure that some of those pressures, import-export pressures between US and Brazil, are being rethought in the next 30 days as the two countries will go back to negotiations? So if you were to take into account the potential of the infrastructure of Latin America and how you currently don't have too much massive regulation on how you create autonomous factories, smart logistics networks, smart distribution networks, leveraging technology for agrotech, as we saw before. It's a massive opportunity for operational excellence and operational efficiency, whether you use these operations for market optimization or cross-border optimization. I would say that's the second big thing. And the third opportunity, which we totally underestimate in Latin America, is the talent. Mm-hmm. There is amazing talent in Latin America, everywhere. I mean, in my first 6 months, I went to 12 markets. I cannot say there was one market that I wasn't impressed with the talent profile that I have seen in Latin America. I would say, however, I think the talent in Latin America is not being given exactly the opportunities to elevate itself beyond. One is the market that they are operating, plus also being to export some of the thinking in a way that shapes the agenda of Latin America. So I think talent elevation is going to be super important for the priority of the
Okay,
region.
so let's take those 3 topics, consumer, technology, and talent, and let's dig deeper on all of them. So how would you describe the modern Latin Latin consumer, and what would you say are the most important trends that you're seeing in the region?
Yeah. I mean, living in the US and coming from Europe as well, I mean, the US has this perception of Latin America consumers is not as sophisticated. You know, they only shop in the mama and papa shops. They're only, you know, value sensitive. Yeah, there are that, but there are many more things than that, right? So the Latin consumer is becoming much more diversified, number one. So if you were to think of even the basket composition that we observe in many markets, Mexico for us is our biggest international market outside of the US. Brazil is our 6th biggest market outside of the US as well. So we have huge markets in Latin America. Consumers want more frequency of buying. They want more personalized experiences. Actually, they want experiences. They have emotional attachments to the brands. They want loyalty, but they want also value. They want premiumization, and they are happy to pay for the quality if they feel it's going to give them some incremental value. They love indulgence, but they also love healthier choices. So it's a quite complicated consumer, which obviously these are consumers that you find everywhere else in the world, but the complication of Latin America is they don't really want to compromise the value of taste. They don't really want to compromise the value of indulgence in some cases. They don't really want to compromise the value of emotional attachment. But they want to do it in a way that now gives them other benefits as well, more functionality, more experiences beyond the actual product. So this is where more localization and more authenticity. So this is where the importance of a company which is global is how are you deeply rooted in the local culture, in the local habits, but in a way that looks modern. Consumers expect modernization of the companies, but in a way that sounds authentic. So that's one. As every other consumer, value is very important. I mean, we cannot suddenly say, oh, you know, great. I mean, we'll give you an amazing package and an amazing experience, and I will charge the product 3x. It's not going to work. So how do you ensure that your revenue growth management capabilities cater for the segmentation of the population that you have, and of course for the specific needs of each of the market is super critical. You go to Chile, you feel you're in Germany. You go to Colombia, you feel you are in Netherlands. And then you go to Mexico and you feel you are in Turkey. It's, so, I mean, the world of Latin America resembles very different countries outside of Latin America. So, and consumers travel, and consumers see, and consumers share. And fortunately or unfortunately, due to the power of social media, consumers are extremely informed. So consumers in Latin America, like any other consumer, expects the most out of you. I'll say last component before you go to the next one. If you look at the data, the highest level of digital penetration in the consumers outside of China is in Latin America. Latin America, the Latinos spend 3 hours a day on social media, on average. 3 hours a day. And they enjoy that experience. If you look at the ROI of campaigns within the social media, it's 10x any other campaign. So you actually have an extremely demanding and sophisticated digital savvy consumer that craves, really craves, for engagement in a very different way comparing to the traditional channel. So how do you give that consumer the opportunity to engage with you differently? I think it's going to be where some of the companies will succeed and some of the companies will fail if they don't do that.
So you talked about emotional attachment, engagement. As PepsiCo, of course, you have global brands, very strong brands, but you also have very strong local brands. How do you manage the tension of, you know, managing and successfully both portfolios?
Yeah. Look, and I think it also depends on how PepsiCo or other big multinational, I think you have various here, grew up in the specific market. I mean, we have markets that we grew through acquisitions, right? And therefore, the importance of having a local brand and still sticking with that local brand is an imperative. I mean, I cannot go to Guatemala and imagine not having tortrix. I mean, people grew up with tortrix. I cannot go to Mexico and not imagine not having sabritas, or gamesa and Marias, right? Or, or margaritas in Colombia. So these are brands that grew up with all the consumers. So therefore, when we're talking about PepsiCo being a global company, PepsiCo in these markets is a local company. And local company not just because of the brand. We source locally, we make locally, we move locally, we sell locally, we have local brands, right? Now, you have other markets where obviously you grew up with a global brand. Why? Because the consumer wanted the local brand. Argentina is a great example. Argentina's biggest brand is Lay's, because the Argentinians consider themselves very Europeans, right? As my friends in Argentina told me, we're Italian, Spanish, and maybe German. And then we are also Argentinians. So therefore, a global brand makes a lot of sense because they associate with whatever they have seen in the markets. Obviously, they travel every year, they have relatives. And then you have markets where having this hybrid between a global and local brand makes a lot of sense. Brazil, for us, is a great example. We have Toddy and Todinhos, which people, if you are from Brazil, you grew up with those brands. And then you also have Raffles. So being a global company doesn't mean you only need to have a global portfolio. You need to have a very bespoke strategy which caters for the needs of consumers, obviously the emotional attachment of the brands that you inherited as part of any successful M&A strategy, and making sure that you develop both the local and the global portfolio in a very purposeful way. The last thing you want is one to cannibalize the other, number one, or the consumers being extremely confused, what exactly do you represent in the market that you're operating? And our motto as a company is we have to be global to local. I mean, that is the only way any company can succeed in markets outside, of course, the domestic market.
Anything that you have not been able to understand or that you wish you knew more about in terms of the Latin consumers?
Well, I haven't been to Venezuela yet. It's coming, so
it's coming, and it's coming big.
And it's coming big. I mean, our volumes are growing amazingly well. So I think there are consumers that have been underrepresented for sure in Latin America. Look, I think there are some very interesting paradigms in Latin, which I haven't seen in the rest of the world, for sure. One is you have markets which are highly penetrated in the industry. You see markets like Mexico. If you look at the per caps of Mexico, I mean, whether it's us or Grupo Bimbo or other companies that are operating, they're very high. They resemble actually the US. Mexico consumers are very, I mean, the food culture is highly penetrated and they really engage with the brands. Then you have markets like Brazil, where you have actually to grow the category, because it's not in the habit of Brazilians necessarily to have that level of consumption, or you have to develop potato chips, the potato category. So one is the habits do change dramatically, due, of course, to the cultural norms. Now, you also have an amazing opportunity as Latin America, because I don't think we and many other companies have really taken into account the wave of tourism that is coming in this continent in a much more deliberate way, besides obviously the North, Mexico, and a bit of Colombia, right? And if you were to see of that wave, which obviously is much more global, what is the portfolio to cater for them, and the value proposition is something that we are exploring. Some facts, in the Caribbean islands, you have 50 million tourists coming from the US on an annual basis. Okay, do we cater for those amazing tourists? Not as we should, right? So amazing opportunities, I think amazing opportunities for growth, number one. Second, what is the number one cuisine outside of Latin America that influences currently food culture? Do you know? Mexican.
Okay.
The Mexican food culture is currently influencing every cuisine outside of Mexico.
Okay.
I mean, we had a review in my other hat, my strategy hat, with our Australia business, and they were saying the Mexico alley in Woolworths and Coles in Australia is growing 5x, comparing to every other aisle in the supermarkets. So the potential of Latin America flavors, products, food culture to be exported in the rest of the world is massive, massive. Whether it's Mexican, I talked about Mexico, Colombian, Peruvian. I mean, if you go to the five-star restaurants, it's like Peruvian. So I think there is a big opportunity for the Latin America companies, especially I would say food companies and beverages companies, to export in the rest of the world, in Asia, in Europe, that they have done, in Africa, a big demand.
Okay. Now let's talk with the transformation officer. Technology, of course, is a huge enabler of changes in Latin America, all the way from understanding the consumer. I know you've developed products using AI, selling better, more effectively, more cost-effectively, transforming supply chains. How do you see technology as a big enabler of the changes that you want to make in Latin America? And is there a focus, or do we need to manage the whole chain?
Yeah, no, it's a massive priority. And it should be a massive priority for a couple of reasons. Is because, one, as I said, consumers dictate it. Consumers want to engage with you in digital means. So you need to be either through direct-to-consumer experiences or eventually agentic commerce and digital commerce experiences very close to the consumer. And therefore, how do you surface your products in those searches? How do you present your products to ensure you are very clear with the claims that you have? How do you use technology to inform your next innovation cycle that is changing and is being very rapid right now? How do you ensure that you involve your commercialization strategy? Super critical, starting with consumers. Then, if you were to think of what has been the traditional model of Latin America, has been what we call a push model. I mean, it's, I'm going to the store, I'm putting and placing the product, I have an amazing, perfect store, amazing display. I am pretty much everywhere the consumer shops, right? The push model is an expensive model because a push model relies heavily on people to push that product. So a big priority for all the companies is how do you do e-go-to-market, right? How do you change your go-to-market model to be able to take the order from the hands of the frontline, the sales frontline, and give it to the hands of the customers? So one of our biggest priorities, and actually LATAM is ahead of anyone else, is in every market in Latin America, whether we do direct-to-store or whether we work with wholesalers or whether we work with distributors or with our big customers, is automation of the order and providing the customer the application to be able to do inventory management, order, fulfillment, and loyalty reward gamification through the application, right? Why? Because we want to reduce S&D and we want to increase the sales, right? It's very simple. It's a financial equation. And that financial equation, if you were to think that the average wage increases in markets span from everything from 8% to 20%, and any government can suddenly do labor reforms, which we are seeing in many markets, including Mexico, the upcoming labor reform and what that would mean for the employees that you have, it's an imperative. I would say that's number two. And number three, which I touched earlier, is rethinking the whole network and the supply chain is super critical. One is because now technology has evolved from the historical wave of automation. I mean, okay, you did the first wave of automation. People are using, AGVs in their factories, in their warehouses, to be able to do some of the tasks that were manual, much more automated. We are going to the second wave, which is actually very exciting for people who are in supply chain, which is how do you use physical AI and actually different layers of artificial intelligence for the next wave of robotics. Because if you were to think in terms of operational efficiency, you know, and many of you come from companies, no one has true efficiency, which is 99.9 like the automotive industry. Why? Because you still have a lot of people and you have a lot of blind spots and a lot of things that you want to optimize. So how do we reach this true efficiency of 99.9, which obviously is a massive unlock from the bottom line of the P&L? Only technology can do that, because you need to develop digital twins, you know, on the engineering, on the operational side. You need to rethink kind of how every part of it, your facility, whether it's a plant or distribution center, a mixing center, and the logistics, the fleet that comes with that is interconnected. Manually, you cannot do that. It's impossible for a human to be able to synthesize billions and billions of data points and petabytes of data to be able to do that. So what you will see, and we are seeing, is a massive investment in the supply chain transformation of Latin America. In every part of the ecosystem, whether it's either industries like us, I'm talking to other companies in the industrial mining space, everyone has technology transformation in the manufacturing space as the #1 priority, because everyone wants to be able to unleash growth by finding the funds from operational excellence.
You've spoken about technology, but of course, technology without talent doesn't work. Are we ready in terms of talent, capabilities, to enable that change through technology?
The talent in Latin America exists, there's no doubt. It's quite distributed, right? Inside Latin America and outside of Latin America. We actually have seen in the past year, and if you talk to all the recruitment companies, they will share exactly the same. There is a massive repatriation wave of extremely exceptional talent from especially US and Europe back to Latin America, because people now feel Latin America has a right to win, and you know, there is stability with the governments, there is opportunities for growth. So you have the talent that is domestic, and there is the talent actually that is coming back to Latin America, very experienced executives that worked outside and now coming back. I think what is not as probably integrated is that ecosystem of university education, companies and employees, okay, and of course governments to be able to create a talent pool which is fit for the future, right? So a lot of the efforts currently and the talent is because, Latino families care about their children kind of, being educated, having the means, being able to have the exciting jobs, right? Or companies investing on that. There isn't an ecosystem like you find in the US. There isn't an ecosystem that you find in China or parts of Asia. So I think that's probably where you have the missing link, is how do industry and government and other types of corporations work together to be able to elevate that talent and prepare that talent to be future fit. If I were to see the talent that we have in PepsiCo, a lot of the efforts that we have done are internal, right? And we do the certification. We have had a digital academy for 6 years now to be able to bring the people to the right level. But the one thing I have to say about our Latin America population, and I said that even before my Latin America CEO role, they are the most curious.
Okay.
They are the most curious. They are the ones that they say, I want to be the first to test. So with curiosity and passion, if you give them the right opportunity, it's a gold mine of opportunities.
Okay. Before we open to our audience, I would like to end with a question about your vision of Latin America. After our questions from our guests, then I'll end with a personal question. But how do you envision our countries in the next 5-10 years for PepsiCo and as a region?
Yeah, I think when I had my first leadership meeting with the team, and of course, they asked me, what is your vision about Latin America? I said I can explain in 3 words the vision of Latin America is growth, growth, growth.
That's easy.
That's the vision, right? LATAM is a growth region. I mean, LATAM cannot be seen as a region, I'll grow 2, 3%, maybe 4%, just because all consumers are strained. No, LATAM has all the opportunities because of a thriving middle class, because of the still, the culture is being developed. Channels are underpenetrated. Categories are not where it should be. Consumers are traveling and are very curious of what is happening outside. It's a wealth of opportunities. So, number one, I think that for all the Latin companies that are multinationals operating in LATAM or LATAM that they want to expand, this is a growth region. So invest in the region. Second, companies are investing in the region. Again, I have been in many forums, including, of course, private equity, VCs, and other funds. There is always that hesitation. I think we discussed what will happen with Mexico. Yeah. But, we have all the upcoming elections, but, Brazil, no matter who gets elected.
It's huge. It's huge and growing.
It's like growing, okay. Chile, the same. Argentina, I mean, we discussed about Milei. I mean, FDI is flying from the US like there is no tomorrow. So this is the time of Latin America to leverage everything that is happening for the investments of the regions to come, of the regions outside of Latin America, but also, of course, for the companies to invest. And I would say the third one, Latin America needs to exploit the momentum, the geopolitical momentum. I totally agree with what John said earlier. If there was one region that has benefited in the past year with the crisis that is happening, it's Latin America, but not necessarily the Latin American consumers. So how do we make an opportunity, an even bigger opportunity for the consumers of Latin America by creating more wealth locally, because with more wealth you will have more consumption, and with more consumption you will have even more GDP.
Great. So it's clear it's our time to leverage for continued growth.
Absolutely.
Great. So now I would like to open to our audience for questions. Who has the microphone? There's a question right there. Un micrófono aquí, porfa. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Sonsoles Gonzalez. I'm from Venezuela, but I've been living outside for over 25 years. But I won't ask you about Venezuela.
You can ask me about Venezuela. I have a very clear point of view on Venezuela and the opportunity.
No, but that's not what I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned briefly wellness, as you're participating in the wellness trend. I'd be curious as to what does that mean for PepsiCo, both in Latin America and global, and how do you see this wellness trends evolving? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And wellness, of course, there are multiple definitions of wellness for everyone. We will not be in the pharma industry for wellness. We are still going to be in the food industry for wellness now. And I didn't even know that we will have products of ours here. But, I mean, you have products like natto chips, which is plantain. I mean, you have more and more consumers that for them food is about wellness, is about creating healthier moments in their lives that they don't need exactly to feel the guilt of either the calories or the ingredients or the functionality or, right? So wellness in the concept of a food company is what makes you feel a superior food experience, but at the same time you get some type of functionality, right? So, I mean, you all listen to the latest trends. There is a protein trend. There is a fiber trend, a big effort on hydration. So if you were to think of the PepsiCo portfolio, and I'm sure all of you know our brands, there's a big push on the Gatorade portfolio as an example based on the science that we have, which is a lot. How do you move consumers from hydration which has been historically, and sports that we have done, to functionality that goes beyond hydration, which gives people more endurance, right? Which complements the wellness trend that we have. And whether it comes from powders and sachets that we have been investing, which you see also in Latin America, but also in the rest of the world, or brands like Propel, which are very big in the US, which cater for specific needs, you will see much more science-backed wellness hydration solutions in the beverages industry, right? And of course, ready-to-drink protein, which will become and is becoming a very big trend, which is where many of the dairy companies with many of the beverages companies and foods companies are now collaborating and saying. So that is one big trend. On the foods portfolio, or what you would call snacking portfolio, you will see a different composition of attributes and ingredients. I mean, we made some very public statements in the US as an example, right? Elimination of artificials and colors, which you see if you go now to any supermarket, you will find your normal Doritos, but you will find also, you know, Doritos Simple and Doritos with protein, et cetera, et cetera. Now, so wellness is, again, is both about how you feel about yourself, but also how your body reacts to what you are eating, right? So every company, this is not just PepsiCo, every company is trying to understand what wellness means for the individual, right? And therefore, you will see a very different personalized nutrition profile for each of the company. Now, one of the things, though, that I have to say, we have to be very science-based, right? Because everyone has a very different definition, including, of course, what each of the government believes wellness and nutrition should be. So we are absolutely supportive of a nutrient density index that is very consistent, that everyone is using, that therefore you develop the same standards. And this is what we are also pushing with all the industry collaborators that we have in the ecosystem. So I hope it addressed a bit your question.
Okay. One more question.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline Gordillo. I'm from Guatemala. So I raised with Tortrix, as you said before.
But importance of local.
My question is with fast-consuming goods, because we are right now with too many local value brands that are decreasing the prices of sales instead of increasing, right? And we, as fast-consuming companies that get value to the categories, we are maybe a little bit decreasing results versus last year, results of sales and volume because of that effect. And my company is PepsiCo Florida. We are like working together in Costa Rica.
Sí.
And now we were bought last year by Heineken. And now we have more transactional results just with gross margin and volume. But I think that we are forgetting the customers, because after pandemic, the customs divided their shopping at least in 3 places to find their better prices because of the budget. They have the same budget of a 4-family person. So how do you manage that effect?
Yeah. Look, I mean, that's why I started with consumer, because consumer segmentation and having the right revenue management capabilities to align with the consumer expectations is super critical. My point wasn't that, oh, you don't need to have a value brand, or you shouldn't have. I mean, we introduced in Mexico this year the 10 pesos bag. We have a 10, 15, 20, right? On top of you can buy the big bag if you want to have a party at home, but also you need to cater for the value segment, which is the 10 pesos bag, right? So you have to cater for everything. I think it's how you do it is where the science comes into the mix comparing to the art, because you can have the value segment, but if it's going to be dilutive and negative margin, pretty much that will not help any of your P&L. Next year, we will try to do your planning process. You will say, oh, thank you very much, I'm run out of money, right? So you need to find way, and this is where, understanding, okay, how do you go to market? What is your design to value strategy? How do you optimize every part of your cost base? Everything from your raw materials down to the way you sell is a super imperative, because there will be consumers that they want value. But with value, it doesn't mean you cannot make money. You can still make money, right? But in the name of value, what you cannot do is destroy the category. Part of what we are talking, and I'm talking with the industry associations, and many of those local companies you talked about is, okay, yeah, you can go and sell things 1 pesos. Okay, so next year when you want to write a check to your employees, you will be out of a business, you will become bankrupt. Right? So we need to do things responsibly and not destroy the category value and have a race to the bottom that we've seen other industries have done. Look at the telco industry. Right? Their margins have been going dun, 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 because it was a price war. We don't want a price war. We want to do smart pricing. So, okay, right value proposition for the right consumer with the right pricing, number one. Now, companies like you mentioned Heineken company, every company, right, doesn't just report to the people, also reports to the shareholders. So therefore, how do you balance between the two is a key priority. I mean, I can tell you, Guatemala, I was in Guatemala. We have, for people that they know, we have the smallest bags in the world, and we sell the most units in the world with Tortrex. And we make amazing profits. Why? Because the teams exactly know how to manage that value chain, right? So there is a way, if people know the market and the consumers, there is a way, obviously, you can manage expectations with big corporations as well.
Athina will be joining us throughout the day, so any other questions you might have, feel free to approach her. But I want to end with a very personal question close to my heart. I'm the dad of an 18 and a 20-year-old daughters. So my 2 daughters are 18 and 21. Here we have lots of moms and dads of young daughters who are starting their professional or academic career. Women empowerment is a topic that's close to your heart.
Yes.
What would be your advice for all the Latin American daughters, ladies, girls listening to you?
Yeah. Yes, that's a very topic dear to my heart. And after COVID, when I saw especially a lot of women dropping out of the workforce, it was very painful for me. So one is, number one, both males and females need to mentor the young generation of females. There aren't enough women working in Latin America in executive positions. I mean, I see more in Mexico. I was in a Brazil industry forum. I was the only female CEO. It's painful when I say that, right? So we need to find ways in the spirit of inclusivity, always, to make sure that we give opportunities. And number two for the females is they need to be assertive and ask what they want. I mean, part of, I mentor, Million Women Mentors as well as I'm part of the chair. Females don't ask for things. Don't ask for a promotion. Don't ask for a pay rise. Don't ask for more, right? So they need to ask for what they believe is fair and what they believe is equitable for them. And I would say third, leverage the system. I mean, I am Greek. They call Greece the Latin America of Europe. Because of the culture, very similar culture, very family culture. I mean, females need to leverage the system to be able then to have a family and a career. You cannot say, oh, I'm going to have one of the two. You can have both of them if you were to do it smartly. So be persistent, be assertive, and you will succeed.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way of ending our conversation. Thank you, Athina, so much for your time, for your commitment, and happy to have you throughout the day.
Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to the day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Athina.